Alright, let's get this over with. So, The Last Jedi. This is another one of those movies that was all over the place when it was first announced. It had a lot riding on it, understandably, since Star Wars is only one of the most important and beloved franchises in the history of fiction. It was going to be a direct continuation of The Force Awakens and carry out all of the hanging plot points that left people in anticipation. However, when the movie finally was released, the aftermath was, well, it was certainly unexpected, I'll tell you that. Only mere hours after this came out, people were pissed with it beyond belief. And they were pissed for many, many reasons. It's safe to say that this was the Phantom Menace situation all over again, with people denouncing it as the worst thing to ever happen to a beloved franchise. But despite hearing about all the hate that it was getting, I was still willing to watch the movie on my own standards. And when I did, I was pretty underwhelmed with it at first. And for a while, I wasn't exactly sure why. But then I watched the movie a second time, and I was bored with it beyond belief. And then I watched it a third time in preparation for this review. And upon my third viewing, I was kind of really pissed off with The Last Jedi. Yes, I am on the same boat as a lot of other people in terms of not liking this movie. But unlike a lot of other people, my feelings for the movie didn't just manifest. I wanted to watch the movie more than once just to see if maybe I was just missing something or I didn't notice something. I wanted to give it another chance because it was something that I wanted to be open-minded towards despite the reputation it was getting. But somewhere between that and the time of this recording, I pretty much accepted the fact that this was practically impossible. So, what the hell happened? How did The Last Jedi end up failing as much as it did? And why is it gaining this reputation as the worst of the Star Wars movies? Well, there's actually a lot of different ways to answer that question, but for the sake of argument, I'm just gonna take a look at the movie myself. But I want to acknowledge some things before going forward. Most importantly is to acknowledge the positive reception this movie has gotten. Yes, there are in fact a lot of people who like this movie. I don't get why a lot of people like this movie, but apparently they do. But this movie, really. Now yes, technically you can put time into finding things to like about it, but when you really look at the film as a whole, there's just so many poorly made decisions, and so many things that just kept building up into bigger and bigger problems. I announced my plans to review this movie a few months ago, and even recently released a trailer for this series, and some of my viewers were a bit skeptical to say the least. Allow me to get this out of the way first. This review is not meant to be an attack on anyone who likes this movie. That should be obvious from the get-go. But I'm sure that it won't stop people from not liking what I have to say either way. I mean, this is Star Wars that we're talking about, and the passion for Star Wars comes from a lot of different places. And that's barring the fact that this movie is much more widely viewed and critically acclaimed than anything else that I've reviewed thus far. I don't know if that's entirely true, but at the time of this recording, the film has grossed over $1.3 billion. And from what I've heard, there are some people who say that it's the best in the series since The Empire Strikes Back. As for me, I like Star Wars myself, quite a lot actually. And I do see it as one of the most iconic and important franchises of all time. I've seen a couple of the cartoons, and I've seen all the movies. That does include the prequels. And each movie, whether it's good or bad, always has something to talk about. It's part of the reason why people are so drawn to Star Wars in the first place. So when The Last Jedi came out, you could imagine that there was a lot to talk about. I'm going to be very blunt, as this movie had something from me that a lot of movies usually don't get. Expectations. I go into something like the Emoji Movie or Ice Age 5 and my inner voice is telling myself, what were you expecting? But in the case of The Last Jedi, what was I expecting? Well, I was expecting something out of Star Wars. Keep in mind that The Last Jedi isn't your average Hollywood sequel. It's a continuation of an ongoing and unfolding story. Unlike most sequels where it feels like the story was just made up so that Hollywood can have more money to make up for its lack of creativity, The Last Jedi was a follow-up to The Force Awakens, an attempt to introduce Star Wars to a new generation of moviegoers. The Force Awakens was a good movie in spite of its flaws, and when this one was announced, I had no reason to assume that I would get anything less than similar quality. On top of that, The Force Awakens ended on a huge cliffhanger, in which there were so many possibilities that could have been done with Episode 8, and what they ended up doing with it was as boring, lazy, and insulting as you can get. I am aware that this movie has already been a hot topic for a long while, and that it's mostly been beaten to the ground. However, the majority of those videos came out only a few days or weeks after the theatrical release. I think it's safe to say that now that the movie is out on Blu-ray and DVD, it's a good way to look back on the movie more effectively. Now, I watched the original trilogy in preparation for this review, but only the original trilogy. I pretty much felt that looking back to the prequels would be a painful experience that wasn't necessary. I did this to refresh my mind on the original trilogy, because I believe that it would help me to better understand the problems with The Last Jedi. But I have to be very clear on this one. Even if I never saw the original Star Wars trilogy, I think it's safe to say that I still wouldn't like this movie because of how sour it feels after The Force Awakens. This movie is supposed to be part of a planned trilogy, and as we proceed, you'll see that The Last Jedi completely destroys that idea in every sense of the word. Now, you can call this review whatever you want after it's all over, but for now, I think it's safe to say that it will be from the perspective of a disappointed Star Wars fan. Normally that would mean that it's not the movie's fault due to being a victim of high expectations, but in the case of The Last Jedi, there is really no excusing the quality of the final product. I'd also like to warn my audience in advance that this is going to be a really huge review. I've been working on this for over a month now, and there is a lot of content to get through, so I apologize if this review series ends up being longer than the movie itself. I just hope that it's not too long. I really don't want to be seen as a super nerd like that Mahler guy. We start off with the classic text scroll meant to set up the events of the movie, and we already have a big problem. The First Order reigns. Okay, did I miss something? How are the First Order already in control of everything? Last I checked, the Order had suffered a tremendous loss. They lost a weapon which was literally the size of a planet, which I assume cost a shit ton of money to invent and keep powered, not to mention the majority of their military power that was stationed there when the thing blew up. This had to have put them in some form of discord, and I'd assume that there would also be a huge uprising with people being really pissed with the First Order after they literally blew up 4 planets in the last film. Are you seriously telling me that the loss of the Star Killer and all of the forces that were stationed there had no impact on their military force? And for that matter, why would the First Order be winning? Maybe I'm just missing something because I'm not one of those super nerds who looks into the tie-in stuff, but what the hell happened to the Resistance that resulted in them being mostly wiped out with the Order taking control? It's something that's very briefly brought up in this opening text, and it's never discussed at any point in the movie. There had to be more of their forces somewhere, and they can't be overwhelmed by the First Order if they were just being crippled by the loss of the Star Killer. We are literally in the first 30 seconds of the movie, and we already have a huge plot hole in our hands. This is gonna be a really fun ride, isn't it? Anyway, we see a rebel base evacuating the surface of a planet just as an Order fleet arrives to destroy it. To buy the rebels time to escape, Poe pilots an X-Wing and flies up to their ship, prank-calling their commander, introducing us to one of the biggest running problems in the movie: the comedy.
You and your friends are doomed. We will wipe your filth from the galaxy.
Okay, I'll hold.
Hello?
Hello? Yep, I'm still here.
Can he hear me?
Hugs?
He can.
With an H? Skinny guy? Kind of pasty?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Look, I can't hold forever. If you reach him, tell him Leia has an urgent
Message for him.
I believe he's tooling with you, sir.
About his mother.
Open fire!
The movie has a lot of moments like this, where they try to add something silly and goofy in order to lighten the mood. But because of how overused it becomes, and trust me, the comedy really becomes overused, it ends up needlessly dragging out the story and grinding the pacing down. There's just so much of it to the point where it feels very unwelcome in a movie that we're supposed to be taking seriously. But even then, the humor isn't successful because of how awkward and poorly timed it is. Just about every single gag is too juvenile and lacking in wit to come across as funny, and they're just hand-waved as filler as they quickly go back to the story, making the comedy feel much more pointless and devoid of meaning. I know it's hard to understand going by just this prank call alone, but trust me, as we continue through the movie you'll really start to understand what I'm getting at. So Poe proceeds to blast the enemy cannons, which gives the last rebel ship a chance to escape. Leia calls Poe to return to the fleet, but he stubbornly insists that they take on the Dreadnought, disobeying her orders. The rebel bombers prepare to engage with the Dreadnought and the TIE fighters defending it, and they are... about as fast as my fucking computer's operating speed. Seriously, why the hell are the rebels using these slow-ass ships for offensive tactics? Aside from the X-Wings doing a very poor job protecting them, the bomber ships themselves are just frustratingly sluggish. They're being destroyed before getting anywhere near the Dreadnought, and because of how slow they are, they can't even act defensively by maneuvering. I don't care how powerful those bomb loads are, it's really not gonna do you any favors if you're approaching your target at 3 miles per hour. The TIE fighters are obviously gonna kill you a dozen times over before you even get near your position. Just why? Why would the rebels waste their resources building ships with such an inferior concept? Why would they use these slow-ass ships for a purpose as important as bombing enemy fleets? They're completely useless because of how easy it is to exploit their weaknesses, and from the looks of how quickly they're getting blown up, they don't even have any effective shields or armor. Do you know what they should be using instead? Y-Wings. These were used as bomber-class ships too, and they weren't as slow as fucking molasses. They were roughly as fast as an X-Wing, and they could fire explosives much more effectively. We saw in Rogue One that they were much more capable of bombing enemy fleets and ships. And the real kicker is that they were capable of firing bombs in more than one direction. Compare them to these useless things that can only seem to drop them downward. So why the hell aren't the rebels using Y-Wings? Did they seriously just abandon them despite how useful they would be in this situation? Is it because they're outdated? Whoop-de shit! You cannot convince me that the Y-Wings are outdated when they've been shown to be far superior to whatever these things are. Even if the Y-Wings are outdated, it's the fucking future! It's been decades after the events of the original trilogy, just update the damn things! Did you just assume that the movie was one toy design too short so you made up this weak-ass ship to add to the list of things to sell to kids? We already knew that they were just gonna eat up the porks no matter what, so on every single front, the existence of these new bomber ships are pointless and fucking stupid! So, after that little ramble, the bombing fleet is reduced to one ship left. And the surviving pilot will not be crucial to the development of another pointless character, don't worry, we promise. She goes up the ladder to get the detonator, but just stops halfway through for no given reason. Seriously, why didn't she just take the extra second to climb to the very top, walk onto the platform, and then reach down to pick up the detonator? Your lives are in danger, lady, there's no need for this dramatic reaching out for an important item bullshit. So she succeeds in dropping the payload, sacrificing herself to destroy the Dreadnought. The rebels escape through lightspeed, where we see that Finn is still unconscious from his wounds. Ah yes, thanks for that pointless jump scare. I'll see if we can add that to Until Dawn as DLC. But in all seriousness, what the hell is this? Finn is all of a sudden better from his wounds from the last movie? As I recall, he got slashed in the back by a lightsaber, which I'm pretty sure is supposed to be a very serious injury. But aside from that, this ends up taking weight away from the cliffhanger from the last movie. Remember at the end of The Force Awakens how Finn being unconscious was one of the mysteries of the epilogue? It made you ask things like, how was he going to recover? How long will he recover? How is he going to find Rey? How much has changed since he was last awake? And how is he gonna react to the passage of time? All gone, just hand-waved away like it was nothing. In literally a microsecond, he's up and running in perfect condition. I'm sorry, I just can't get over this. He got fucked in the spine by a laser sword. And you're trying to tell me he can just shake that off? You'd might as well have said that Kylo Ren just threw a pillow at him because it has no effect on him whatsoever. I'm not even kidding. He's up and walking around like it was nothing. You were treating this like it was a big deal at the end of the last film, and then you just completely drop it. You can't just do that and not expect your audience to catch on to your laziness. And to add insult to injury, we get not one, but two forced bits of comedy. First you have Finn doing this crappy prep fall out of his bed, and then you have him awkwardly walking around in a suit that's spraying water everywhere. And this is supposed to be a follow-up to one of The Force Awakens' biggest cliffhangers. The tone that you are going for is not compatible with this scenario. So, after that happens, we cut back to the island where we see that Rey is still holding on to Luke's saber and hasn't given it to him yet. Okay, what kind of timeline are you in that so much has happened in such a small amount of time? According to this movie, the First Order managed to overwhelm the rebels, obtain control over most of the galaxy, and recover from the loss of the Star Killer in about 10 minutes. Rey handing Luke the lightsaber was the last thing we saw in The Force Awakens, and she still hasn't given it to him? If you want to say this takes place a couple of weeks or months after the events of the last film, that would have to mean that Rey and Luke were just awkwardly staring at each other with no food and no bathroom breaks. And even that doesn't make any sense because we saw that the Millennium Falcon was traveling to Luke's location at light speed. This can't be happening weeks later. Is there some kind of paradox shit going on and we're just seeing the events of the story in a different order? Because that's the only way that this could make any sense. So we see Rey handing over the saber to Luke after what I'm assuming was about 2 months of awkward silence, as we see the long-awaited reaction to Luke being reunited with his lightsaber after so many years.
What the hell was that?
Okay, we're roughly 15 minutes into this movie, and I'm already tempted to slam my fist through the monitor. Aside from the fact that this is yet another forced joke, Luke tossing away his saber like that, completely disregarding the meaning behind having it returned to him, is a huge disregard to the establishment of his character. We'll get into more of that as we go on because, trust me, it practically becomes a running theme in this movie. But aside from that, this is what we've been waiting for 2 years? All that wait, all of that potential drama of seeing Luke's saber being returned to him after years of hardship. All of it was leading up to a cheap gag? Was this some kind of fanfiction that Rian Johnson just put together as a joke but they thought he was being serious and they made a movie out of it? Where's the real fucking script? So we see Rey following Luke across the island, and it's here that we're introduced to the deadliest of disgustingly cute and marketable creatures since Pikachu. The Porgs. And honestly, I really don't get it. I guess they do look cute and cuddly looking, aside from the eyes that just look like 2 really deep black holes staring into the depths of your soul, but throughout the whole movie, they don't do anything of relevance. Every time they're on screen, they're just standing around looking cute and really doing nothing else. It just pads out the film's runtime because the movie makers are like, okay folks, we're introducing Star Wars to a new generation of kids. Does anyone have an idea for a cute and cuddly creature that will distract them from our terrible writing? Well, I came up with this cross between a penguin, a duck, and a puffin. Still not enough. I can give them blank eyeballs staring into your soul. Brilliant! But seriously, what is with the film's fascination with these things? At least the Ewoks helped beat up the Empire in Return of the Jedi. There's no point in putting focus on these porgs because they're just there for marketing purposes. They add nothing to the story or its theme, so there's no point in giving them so much attention. Anyway, Rey tries to convince Luke to come back while getting help from Chewbacca when he begins to question how they found him.
How did you find me?
Long story, we'll tell you on the Falcon.
Falcon. Wait. Where's Han?
Wait, Luke doesn't know that Han was killed? Alright, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Luke is supposed to be extremely talented in the Force at this point, meaning that he has the ability to sense stuff going on across the galaxy. So if that's the case, why didn't he feel Han's death through the Force? I mean, we saw that Leia was able to sense his death and was even able to recognize the cause, and she's obviously less skilled than her brother. Hell, Obi-Wan wasn't even in his prime when he sensed the destruction of Alderaan. He was able to sense billions of deaths in a single instant, and he couldn't have developed an emotional personal connection with every single sentient being living there. How is it that Luke wasn't able to sense Han's death, but Leia was? Was he just too far away for it to work? Or was he really just so caught up in feeling sorry for himself that he didn't bother to even notice the death of one of his closest friends? Well, regardless, we cut to Lord Snoke's throne room where he confronts Kylo Ren on his failures.
The deed split your spirit to the bone. You were unbalanced, bested by a girl who had never held a lightsaber. You failed!
Hey, slow down, dude. We're not supposed to know that Rey is unfairly OP until later. So after being put in his place by Snoke, Kylo Ren proceeds to go into an angry fit, destroying his helmet. And I'm really just not feeling it. I get that Kylo has been established with unstable anger issues, but there's really no subtlety to it. At least in Revenge of the Sith, there was some form of progression with Anakin's anger. Over time, he was consumed with fear and uncertainty over the possible death of his wife, which frustrated him. He was persuaded into the dark side of the Force because he didn't think there was anywhere else to go to find some answers. And after he obtained his black suit, they had ways of channeling his anger, in a way that was properly integrated into both his character and his fighting style. Whenever I see Kylo getting angry in this movie, he comes across as an angsty teenager who's not getting his way. Instead of feeling the frustration of him not being able to live up to his idol's legacy, you just get the sensation that you're watching an immature and unintentionally childish breakdown. I guess him destroying the helmet symbolizes how he's moving on from his desire to be like Vader, but we could have gotten that without this over-the-top tantrum. They're trying way too hard to get you to take him seriously, and it completely backfires. I mean, why didn't he just crush it using the Force? Wouldn't that have gotten his anger across while demonstrating some subtlety and restraint? I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I, a small-time YouTuber, came up with a more interesting take on this scene than a professional Hollywood writer and director. But considering that this is Rian Johnson we're talking about here, I'm kind of using the term professional very loosely. So, after that tantrum in the elevator, Kylo orders his ship to be ready, and we cut back to Rey trying to convince Luke to come back and join the fight.
You don't need Luke Skywalker.
Did you hear a word I just
You
said?
think what? I'm gonna walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order?
Yes, that is exactly what we expected you to do, you fucking moron! So we see Luke's daily routine on the island, complete with the infamous green milk drinking scene. Huh, must be the lost Nesquik flavor. Breasty mint. I really wish I could say that this is the weirdest thing we'll be seeing in the movie, but trust me, it doesn't end there. And I really wish it did. So some time goes by and Rey ends up being called to a particular looking tree. She finds some mysterious looking books when Luke comes in to explain some things.
The original Jedi texts. Just like me, they're the last of the Jedi religion.
Keep this scene in mind for later, folks, because trust me, it is really gonna bite this movie in the ass later on.
I can't teach you.
Why not? I've seen your daily routine. You're not busy.
I will never train another generation of Jedi. I came to this island to die. It's time for the Jedi to end.
Why? Leia sent me here with hope. If she was wrong, she deserves to know why. We all do.
Alright, a couple of things wrong with that scene. First off, why the fuck is Luke now a moping idiot who's lost all hope in the fight? Was Kylo's betrayal really so traumatizing that he just completely gave up? Through all of the original trilogy, Luke was hopeful and he strived to fight back. He never gave up no matter what hardship was thrown at him, and he was willing to sacrifice himself to save his father. He was a beacon of inspiration and hope, not just to the characters but to the audience. Even when finding out that his father is Darth Vader and that his mentor wasn't being fully honest with him, he still held on and kept pushing himself forward. This Luke is such a strong contrast and so unrecognizable to people who grew up with the original trilogy that you don't even get the sensation that original trilogy Luke and Last Jedi Luke are the same person. Even if he did lose morality for Kylo's betrayal and blamed himself for what happened, why does that make him completely give up on fighting the First Order? He's just gonna feel sorry for himself while billions of people are suffering? What kind of Jedi does that? Second, if you came to this island to die, what the fuck was even the point of looking for the map? You know, the very thing that we spent the entire movie chasing after? I guess now it wouldn't have mattered if the First Order got to that map first. They would have been more than happy to make sure that you died on that island. Third, by making Luke into this moping idiot, you're making him abandon everything that he's learned about the Jedi way, which was a huge part of his character arc in the original trilogy. Remember that lightsaber toss over the shoulder gag from earlier? That right there was the first sign of trouble. And remember, that wasn't just Luke's lightsaber, that was also Obi-Wan's lightsaber. An heirloom from his beloved mentor that was passed down to him out of trust and friendship, now being treated as a prop for a fucking stupid joke. You're making Luke abandon his responsibilities as a protector of the galaxy, dishonoring everything that the past Jedi have ever fought and died for, and rewriting everything that we knew about him. Making Luke into this cranky old hermit who believes it's time for the Jedi to end is not what people loved him for. They loved him because of what he represented in the original trilogy. He was a kid at heart who had to go through trials and tribulations and grow into a stronger and more dependable person. And because of how he was hit with so many harsh things along the way but still came out on top, it made his character growth feel more triumphant. He was taking what he learned about the Jedi to heart and understood how precious and important their legacy was. This movie takes all of that, rolls it into a ball, and throws it into a garbage fire so we can have some fake philosophy about how the Jedi are a lost cause and how there's no hope in defeating the Order. And fourth, and most importantly, what the fuck happened to that search for the Jedi Temple that Han Solo mentioned? Did you really just think that it sounded cool at the time but didn't know what to do with it in the sequel, so you just dropped it entirely? I know it's strange to say that this is the most important thing considering how I talked about the disservice to Luke's character, but it fits into the movie's running theme of completely forgetting that the previous movie even existed. It becomes increasingly obnoxious to the point where it doesn't even feel like a sequel at all. It feels like this huge, poorly put together parody that's trying way too hard to be taken seriously. So, after that infamous moment, we rejoin Leia mourning the loss of the fleet that Poe got killed in the fight against the Dreadnought. She smacks Poe across the face, demoting him just as the First Order manages to find them, revealing that they were able to track them through light speed. Okay, so what was the point of that fight against the Dreadnought? If the rest of the movie revolves around the plot point that the Rebel fleet are being chased by the Order anyway, then what was the point of that fight where they had to destroy the Dreadnought to ensure their escape? Oh, because the Dreadnought would have followed them too? Well, okay, then cut the Dreadnought out of the movie. The entire opening sequence is spent on fighting it and destroying it, which ultimately means nothing because throughout the rest of the movie, the rebels are still in danger fleeing from the First Order. It was padding out the film's runtime, and it was needlessly coming across as a pointless means to build up tension. Seriously, if you cut out the Dreadnought from the movie and have the rebels flee after Poe destroys the cannons of maybe another ship, you could have continued on with the movie and nothing about the premise would have changed at all. Was it because we needed to see Rose's sister die to add some weight to her character arc? You could have easily made that into its own story instead of a 3-minute cameo. Like maybe a prequel comic or something. The movie is overstuffed as it is and we don't need more of this crap getting in the way. So realizing they can no longer rely on lightspeed to escape, the rebels prepare for a counterattack.
Permission to jump in her next wing and blow something up?
Permission granted.
Wait, you just demoted him for pointlessly getting your fighters killed, and all of a sudden you trust him again? Do you have some kind of rare case of amnesia that kicks in randomly within 20 seconds? It might seem like I'm nitpicking at first, but later down the line it becomes another running problem in the film. Lines like this end up having their meaning completely contradicted or seeped away because of a later spoken word of dialogue. It makes the choice of words feel very inconsistent, and when you have something like that happening throughout your movie, it makes your writing look very absent-minded. Anyway, we have another space battle where Kylo leads an attack on Leia's ship. But as Kylo has a clear shot of killing his mother, he appears to hesitate, hinting at his struggle between the light and the dark side of the Force. Did you think that was good character writing? Well, brace yourself for disappointment because this is also gonna bite the movie in the ass later on. So some TIE fighters take the shot instead, resulting in everyone in the hull getting sucked into space. And we see that the hull is on fire because, as you know, there's no fucking air in outer space.
how the Force works?
Okay, what the fuck? Am I really seeing this? Is this actually real, or am I just in some kind of weird fever dream and I'm just seeing stuff? Leia, who had no extensive skill in using the Force, is not only surviving the vacuum of space, but is flying back to the ship while still maintaining the ability to breathe, and didn't even freeze to death when she was first thrown out of the ship. Oh my god. Wow. That statement was so fucking stupid. I actually laughed at it. This is some kind of satire of Star Wars, like a literal parody of the series. It is so goddamn stupid that I could almost swear that this was a Robot Chicken sketch. If I didn't see the movie and someone straight up told me that this actually happens, I just laugh it off. But no, no, this is actually part of the Star Wars canon, and with that realization, it stops being funny. Where the fuck did this come from? I'm being serious. How the fuck did they even come up with this? It literally makes no sense so badly they had to try to come up with something that stupid. Barring the obscurity that she was able to survive the vacuum of space, Leia was never shown to be this skilled with the Force. I mean, sure, she must have gained experience in order to sense Han's death, but I highly doubt this much. She's never been shown to use it in combat, she never used it to lift heavy objects, and she certainly never used it to fly through outer space. Even if she's supposed to be Anakin's daughter and his power was just passed down to her, which would explain the theories on Rey's heritage, she was still never shown to use it for combat or survival purposes. It literally comes out of nowhere, and with everything else that's happened so far and will happen in the rest of the movie, it seriously feels like they just made this up as they went along. And that's not a good thing. This movie is part of a planned trilogy. They had to have put more thought into the overall storyline before making these movies. And now you have one of the biggest asspulls in Star Wars history. Really think about it. This scene somehow made it into the script and went through the table read, multiple reshootings, the final draft, and into the final cut of the movie without a single person asking, why? You wanna know why? Well, fuck you, that's why. I'm sorry, I really need to take a break. I really do need it after the stupidity I just witnessed, and this is not one of those movies that you can get through in one sitting. It cannot be done. Stick around for part 2, and I really hope that this headache goes away by then.